we need to take this into historical context here. Devil May Cry 1 came out alongside, just as a small list, Gran Turismo 3, Final Fantasy X, Jak and Daxter, Metal Gear Solid 2, Silent Hill 2. All of these were big blockbuster games, and the absolute console-moving juggernaut that is Grand Theft Auto 3. All of those games came out in the same year that this game came out. And this game still managed to push 2.16 million units. Now, if you've paid any kind of attention to sales figures, which is something that's been a recurring trend in my reviews, especially with Capcom, you'll know that that is gargantuan. 2 million is a huge amount of units moved. That's especially that's true in general. That's true for a brand new franchise. That's true for the time. That's true considering the competition they had. And that's true for the fact that they weren't even really supporting it all that much. That is a massive, massive amount of sales. And it's one of the reasons why the franchise has been able to endure, despite the fact that it has twice stumbled so hard that they almost pulled the plug on the franchise. But I'll get to those things later. So let's go ahead and put this in the highlight reel and explain something. We are not playing DMC DMC. DMC DMC sucks. I have vetoed DMC DMC. I refuse to play it because it's a wonderful combination of unpleasant, awkward, and cringe. There's always a value in reviewing bad games, but DMC DMC is simply vulgar. No thank you.
The legendary Dark Knight, Sparda.
And you're going to hear that name a lot over the next couple of weeks.
Devil May Cry. Sorry, we closed at 9.
Then why'd you pick up the phone?
Again, no password. I can't seem to get any real business.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
Well, well, what do we have here? Nature calls? It's in the back.
So, you must be the handyman who'll take any dirty job. Am I correct?
Almost. I only take special jobs, if you know what I mean.
You're the man who lost a mother and a brother to evil 20 years ago. The son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda, Mr. Dante.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Are you really the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda? Didn't your daddy teach you how to use a sword?
Sword. Time to go to work, guys. Even as a child, I had powers. There's demonic blood in me.
What strength?
You were the first one to know about my vengeance. It looks like I'm getting closer.
It seems that way, but I'm not your enemy. My name is Trish. I came here to seek your help, to put an end to the underworld.
What?
Sorry. Very serious time.
Of the underworld resurrected.
Mundus.
Yes. His powers were sealed by Sparta. He's attempting to gain control of the human world once again. He has been preparing to open the gate on Malay Island.
No! Horse neighs in the background. I want to give A+ to intro. Probably just 1+ because it is still ridiculous and it still has bad dialogue. But, I mean, come on. The intro starts off with our main character being like, I'm gonna get you. And then she's like, oh yeah, and then she impales him with a sword, electrocutes him, and then throws a motorcycle at him. To which he just shoots the motorcycle back at her, and then gets up, sword still in him, which is actually kind of an important point. Completely nonplussed by it. Now, obviously, this is all silly schlock, and that's kind of how that's supposed to work. But at the same time, I do have to point out that it does get across something very important. In a lot of video games, people can just kind of take damage and be fine. In most video games, actually. See the ever-lovely Resident Evil 8 for a particularly ridiculous example of that. But by actually establishing in lore that Dante has the ability to just kind of be like, nah, and shrug it off without even having a hole in his chest for his trouble, it kind of helps to establish that we are playing someone who is superhuman and can do this kind of stuff. Even if he didn't have the terrible dialogue, this is something that is now established and will actually be relevant for most of the upcoming games, most especially for 3 and 5. But anyways, the thing I actually enjoy about a static camera, or even a dynamic camera like the ones we're seeing here, is that it allows the cinematic director to decide and design scenes. Even if it's more of a gameplay function, it allows them to say, I want this level, this section, this boss, this encounter to look a certain way. It adds a bit more manual craft to the thing. Obviously, that takes more time and more effort, but it is something you can do, as opposed to essentially just making a program that, which is what a more modern games tend to do, and just have the program say, look at this character, and then stay roughly this distant away, and then it's got other little scripts going all the time that's telling it to not intersect with collision or to try and move around enemies or all sorts of fun stuff like that. And yeah, actually, thank you, Hazardous. Great example. The Uncharted series is a fantastic example of that kind of manually crafted camera specifically for a degree of cinematic experience. I hate to use the word cinematic because a lot of people misuse that, but you know what I mean. I don't mean that movies are art and games aren't. That's stupid. Yeah. Now, there is one problem with this camera, and, well, you've already seen it happen. Oh, jeez. There's a couple of places where I'm probably going to get a little turned around and lost because everything is brown, and the camera likes to just go periodically. Oh, and each time you do, the controls get a little wonky for just a second. So, please forgive me as I suck. It is, as always, my job to be your sucking monkey. Wait, don't quote that out of context. I forget what this is actually called in programming design, but it's when your feet are glued to the ground unless something intersects you. So unless you jump, or unless you get hit by a knockback, or unless you do like a dodge roll or whatever, your feet are absolutely glued to the ground and you cannot go down, even though this is obviously a navigatable space, right? So the thing is, it's kind of hard to showcase this properly, but the way it works is you do the shift, and if you don't move the camera at all, or not the camera, sorry, the movement at all, you keep going in the direction you were. But the moment you kind of do something, it gets wonky. Like the moment you start to move, it readjusts and says, oh, you're here now. So that's the trick. And I only mention that because in several cases, it's easier than you'd think to go one extra degree to the left or right and get screwed up. So that's why I'm going to be doing that regularly. Oh, hey, it's Mundus. Marionettes are low-class evil spirits that borrow the bodies of puppets to exist in a physical state. Hazardous. There's also the Bloody Mary. The red outfit is dyed with human blood, which somehow increases their evil powers. Now, I don't want to get into this, because this won't actually really come up until, honestly, I think 5. But, in the Devil May Cry franchise, for whatever reason, blood is, like, super it's the source of power and magic and all sorts of other dumb stuff. So there's going to be a whole lot of focus on blood, human blood, demon blood, blood, all kinds of blood. And yeah, 5 is what really codifies this, but it's kind of a background recurring element in the whole franchise, as you can see right here, because not only is one of the first enemies we ever fight empowered by blood, but we use blood as a currency to empower ourselves. One big advantage of the guns in the first game, I can say this right now, we can move while shooting. One big disadvantage of the guns, they require you to hold down R1 while shooting. You can't just tap this button to shoot for some reason. You have to hold down the lock-on. I get why, but it does mean it's a little bit of extra hand strain in order to do that, which is going to be my biggest opponent in Devil May Cry 2, other than the script and the voice actors, obviously. There's a book written about the administration run by the successive Castellans. The later Castellans imposed ridiculous taxes and barbaric execution. Why am I reading this? Do I have to impale myself with this, too? God damn it! Another way that Devil May Cry 1 is a little bit more Resident Evil-y is that most of the bosses are recurring rather than individual. In later games, you would tend to see, you know, a boss and then a different boss and a different boss and a different boss, and only occasionally see the same boss but slightly different. In 1, well, let's just say we're going to be fighting the same bosses several times. I just want to talk about game design for a second. I know you hate it when I do that. There's a concept that I can't remember the terms for right now, that we've actually discussed briefly once before, because it usually doesn't come up. In fact, I think the game we've covered that does this concept the most is Kingdom Hearts, of all things. But we have actually talked about this when it came to Mortal Kombat 11. At least I think it was Mortal Kombat 11. The point is... No, it wasn't Mortal Kombat. What game did we cover where we discussed this already? Enemies have a thing, which I'm going to describe terribly because I'm a moron. This thing makes it so that, yeah, they've got their health bar, but they've got another little factor, another thing they're keeping track of. This is their break bar, their guard bar, whatever the hell you want to call it. A lot of games call it a different thing. But the point is, instead of emptying, it actually fills up. As they take damage successively, once it reaches a certain point, they get to the point where they can't be hit. More complex games will actually have a gradient here. So, for example, let's say I hit a person 10 times, and then as I hit them 10 times, they start blocking or start dodging, whereas they wouldn't even trigger that before. Like, they could not dodge or block until they got to X part of the defense bar. And if you fill it up even more, then they get to the point of being effectively invincible. Where they, I think you're right, I think it was God of War where we discussed this, because beat 'em up. Revenge value. Yeah, that's what Kingdom Hearts calls it. But once you get to a certain point, they straight up cannot be hit until this bar has emptied or until they've hit you. There's a lot of different triggers, but this is something that goes all the way back to the old arcade era. This is a very old concept, all things considered. And again, Double Dragon is an example of a game that used this. The whole point of it is that if this concept did not exist, and I talked about this in God of War, if this concept didn't exist, the player would just be able to juggle and stomp everything effortlessly. Now that's fine if you're playing a Dynasty Warriors game, but when you're playing a beat-em-up, what you want is for the player to be challenged. You want the player to actually have to think about how to approach the packs of enemies and how to deal with them, as opposed to just mash, 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 mash. If you've been paying attention, which I don't blame you if you haven't, the whatever it's called bar, the defense bar, has actually cropped up 3 times so far in trash fights. But where it really showed up was in the boss fight we just did. And again, I'm going to make a point in the highlight reel to show a clip of when I actually triggered it very deliberately, where he was just like, nope, 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 and you just could not get through it because I had hit him too much recently and needed to reset the bar in order to get back into normal combat. Now, depending on the game, a lot of different games approach this differently. Some of them do it where they have to get hit with a certain type of attack. I'll talk about that in a second. Some games have a thing where they have to not be hit for X amount of time, and some games have a thing, and Kingdom Hearts is one I could tell about this right now, where they have to hit you. If they hit you, it resets the bar. Or if they don't get hit for X period of time, then it resets the bar. But the first one is the one I really want to talk about, because some games do this thing, and I could point to a couple here, where you've got your combo attack, right? So you've got swing, swing, and then you got like this really big swing, right? So that really big swing, that's the one that actually triggers the shield bar to go up in some games. So if you do swing, swing, stop yourself, and then swing, swing, stop yourself, their shield bar never goes up because it's never being triggered. Now, I'll freely admit this is the kind of thing I wouldn't even notice except for speedrunning, where a lot of the strategy involves not completing a combo specifically in order to try and avoid that mechanic. But anyways, that's that concept, and I just wanted to talk about it briefly because, again, it's in the bones of a beat-em-up game, and it does help to make some of the boss fights work better than they otherwise would. I think I am actually going to give it a plus. I've been thinking about it to the fight we just did. A rank! Holy crap! I didn't suck that terribly. I mean, I still sucked, obviously. Monkey, hello. I don't even want to call that subtle, but that is an interesting bit of lore building. That there's all these things venerating the great, lion statue, and lions are awesome, and courage is amazing, and you need to be venerated and strong and willing to sacrifice for the greater good, and blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff that would probably be good if not for the fact that it's all venerating Mundus, because Mundus, who we've already seen the statue of, is the dude with 3 eyes. You've sat down and you've designed a few levels. And then someone says, no, 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 the game you've already put time and work and effort into making is actually for a completely separate franchise that doesn't exist yet. You are now building this new franchise. And it's like, And that's kind of why the first part of this story, if you could even call it that, drags severely. Because we're still in Resident Evil land. More or less, literally. Hence, why the plot so far, and for the last 8 missions, has been escape the castle of the crazy evil cultists. There's the 3 eyes again, by the way. Hi, Evo. Look, I've been impaled twice so far. What's your problem? The shields that glow with light and a pair of lances shall lead to the battleground. Whoops! Sorry! I hope you memorized that. The fool who awakens me shall pay dearly with the fires of hell. This is my favorite weapon in the first game. Now, here's the funny thing. When I first played this game, I actually thought that Ifrit would be like the fast attack, punchy, rapid fire kind of a thing, right? No. No, this is the big, heavy weapon. I mean, you could combo it in a bajillion ways and directions. Like, but it's the wonk. This is the punch. Oh yeah, I didn't even show it off properly. I'm sorry, I actually forgot to do that. So you can manually charge each hit. I don't want to start a conversation because I know nitpicking is one of those things. But what? I'm pretty sure chat just exists to mock me. That's my life. What? Where's the music? Okay. Use new strength to open the door. What extremely obvious and stupid thing am I missing here? For bonus points, I actually tried that earlier. I can't even tell you why it didn't work at the time, but it didn't work at the time. The Sign of Chastity, which is, of course, a brain. Oh yeah, I can do this now. This is the ability I just bought. Ifrit! Biggest upsides and downsides of Japanese companies compared to the Western outputs. Upsides. Japanese companies have a tendency to do their own thing, which means they tend to not follow some of the more egregious chains or trends. It also means they are harder to buy. So, you know, Nintendo isn't going to get bought out anytime soon, not just because they're a giant, but because they're Japanese. Downsides. Japanese companies tend to do whatever they want to. Can you show me my enemy, please, game, instead of the wall? I could see Red Steel being a hack and slash. Sorry.
Yours are definitely the powers of Sparta. Even more so. But I cannot let you live. I serve my master Mundus.
You can't fight with that wound.
Mighty is the power of Mundus. Master, grant me one last surge of power. The power to finish him.
Triple eyes.
Master Mundus.
It's true, Blow Up Alex. Secretly, this game is too spongy.
You beat him. Maybe it was too easy for you.
Mundus. His heinous ways make me sick, killing even his own, like they were nothing. He's the one that took the life of my mother, my brother, and Shirley. My mother used to always tell me that my father was a man who fought for the weak. He had courage and a righteous heart. In the name of my father, I will kill Mundus.
So, if you're wondering why it is we're not really doing much in the way of lore running for DMC1 specifically, that's why. All I'll say is that, and we talked about this earlier, simple is not necessarily bad. If I use the word generic, however, what I mean is you have done simple badly. Mundus is generic. It's funny because he's behind so much of the greater lore of the series, as we'll talk about in future games, when it matters. But here he's just... and then we will ask them for 1 million blood! billion, trillion! Yes. Well, that's irritating, because the solution here was to look at the sconce. I had to look up a walkthrough to know that I can interact with this stupid fire. Anyway, so speaking of Nightmare... So you're probably wondering why I'm using this sword, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. Did you see the damage I just did in one round? Okay. Why not? Let's give the hills and chocolate argument. I'm going to give you a very truncated version of it because I've said it so many different times. The reason I call it hills and chocolate is because it's like this. Morally speaking, we all have our hills, right? Maybe you care about animals and proper treatment of animals. Maybe you care about not buying things from a certain country. Maybe you care about not having abusive worker practices. Maybe you care about making sure that it's supporting certain types of workers. These are all your hills, right? These are all the hills you can stand on and fight on. Nobody can stand on all the hills. It doesn't work that way. Society, life, existence, we are too interconnected and too intermingled to functionally stand on every hill simultaneously. So, you pick your hills. That's kind of it. That's kind of the summary, but what that actually involves and means is, for example, Luneruth does not have the right to be upset at me for standing on the hills I stand on. And I do not have the right to be upset at Luneruth for standing on the hills she stands on, and the inverse of that, too. If there's something Luneruth cares about that is a hill for her that I don't stand upon, she can't judge me for that because I can't stand on every hill, and vice versa. I cannot judge Luneruth, to use a specific example, for not standing on the hill of not supporting Diablo Immortal. That's the biggest takeaway from the hills argument, because we're all culpable, to some extent and to some degree or another. So we pick our hills, and we're good. Let me make this point very, very clear. Like, we pick our hills, then... And that's why you come to my Devil May Cry streams, to talk about Nestle. So you may be wondering why they're doing so much reuse of these areas, as we're going back through the castle for the second time at this point. So you remember what I mentioned about not having a huge budget, not having a lot of support? This is the reason I'm even bringing this up at all is because Taquita mentioned something earlier about how later Devil May Cry games start doing things because Devil May Cry 1 did it. Whether that's good or bad, it's more debatable, and we'll get there when we get there, but the reason for this kind of backtrackiness, if you can even call it that, is literally they needed to reuse the assets. If you're paying attention, this is actually not the same room as before, in addition to the fact that it obviously functions differently. There are a few bits about it which is different. This is a separate cell, to put it as bluntly as possible. But it's a lot cheaper and a lot quicker to effectively grab all of the assets, geometry, interactions, artworks, textures, etc., of the first room that you already made, paste it over here, and then make a few changes to it, than to make a completely new room. Alright, I'm ready to escape the island. It's not working. There's blood over here. Why is there blood on the plane? There's, like, no blood anywhere in this entire game. In terms of, like, on the ground. There's just blood on the biplane. I know, it's just bad paint. But, I mean, isn't that just what blood is anyways? Ready for the in-depth, extensive lore behind Nightmare? Oh yeah, gross warning, because obviously hell has to be a bunch of guts for some reason. Pretty much every Devil May Cry game has at least one guts level. They're all gross. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. So, the in-depth lore of Nightmare. You ready for this? It was so powerful that it threatened even Mundus. So Mundus had to craft runes to restrain Nightmare's power. Otherwise, Nightmare would consume all of hell. No, Dr. Winter, it's only been the thing I've been bringing up the most this entire time. and the most well-known topic about this game. In fact, I guarantee you there's going to be at least someone in the highlight reel and or the VOD who says, hey, did you know that this game was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 4? 10 to 1. Bet you money. Oh no, she's betrayed us.
You fool! You're so easy.
Trish, you?
Humans. What sweets. You should know better than to trust a stranger. Your presence has become a hindrance to my master's bloody scheme. Now die!
One boss fight later.
Awkward camera, awkward controls, inconsistent hurt box, inconsistent collision. Lots of attacks that you have no dodge button for. Having to target part of the wall while not being capable of actually doing so manually, so just trusting on RNG to successfully do so. All the Nightmare fights suck a little bit, but this one sucks the worst because of just how, ugh, the whole thing is. Anyway, so Trish is dead.
Dante! Dante, why did you save my life?
Because you look like my mother.
Not a great reason.
Now get out of my sight. The next time we meet, it won't be like this.
Dante!
Don't come any closer, you devil! You may look like my mother, but you're nowhere close to her. You have no soul. You have the face, but you'll never have her fire!
Oh, this game. I don't think it's working. Oh, this handles terribly. You notice how I'm kind of stuttering all over the place? That is the tiniest bit of movement. And the controls are reversed. Not in a good way. They're like double inverted. This is down and this is right. Here, let me show that off. This is down and this is right. So it's not double inverted. I'm saying that wrong. One of them is inverted and one of them is not. So it's like the worst possible thing. I forgot this is what I'm supposed to be doing here. My bad. I have the least opinion about 4, mostly because I only played it the one time. What can I say? But first, I gotta shut up so you can enjoy this nonsense.
My mother risked her life for me. And now you, too. I should have saved you. I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's so bad. It's so bad. I'm gonna give the positive. I'm gonna give the positives. I wasn't sure. I don't like to judge until we're there. Memes don't always hold up. But that's amusing. So, You know how in the Bayonetta series all the angels look like mechanical monstrosities with goopy organic insides? I should mention that the director of that game is the same director as this game. No reason, I just thought I'd mention it.
The evil is still alive. They will someday return.
There's no need to worry, right? Because the world has the legendary Dark Knight Dante and his sidekick.
How much fuel does that plane have? So, for the highlight reel, some of you may notice the last couple of highlight reels, or maybe just the last one, didn't actually have the graphic up. This one won't either, nor will the next couple. It's a long story. I don't feel like getting into it. We'll get back to it. The graphics with the comparison sheet will come back once that's fixed. So, having said all that, I'm just going to give you a bit of a rundown. Story. -3. That's 0.41 negatives per hour density and a 36.36% ratio. Not good. But that's okay, because the gameplay, -5. That is a density of -0.68. And that is a gameplay ratio of 42.42%. That's not great, and that's more or less exactly what I was expecting. Our final golden number is... That can't be right. No, that is right. Hang on. Let me check something really quick here. Double checking. You're the one. No, yeah, that is correct. I agree with that sentence. Wow. Yeah, okay. Giving us a final golden number of -20.59. That's not good. As I've said many times, any negative is bad. That's pretty bad. And that actually puts this game below Just Cause 4 for a bit of direct comparison, which, for the record, I completely stand behind. Now, you might think, Lord, but... First of all, this is a first game. All first games tend to not do great, right? We know that. That's a common thing. It's a common trend. We know how that works. Second of all, honestly, this game's really rough, and this follows a very typical progression for a lot of games in this era, but also in general. It starts off strong, and it basically never stops getting worse all the way through. And yeah, some of the stages drag, some of the stages are too short. The story is all over the place. Sometimes the boss battles are fantastic, sometimes they're terrible. It really is a mixed bag. It makes so much sense with all the stuff I've already shared about the behind the scenes, why this game plays that way. It also makes so much sense why people loved it. This was sand. And on the off chance you've never heard me use that phrase, it's actually, I borrow it from my friend Gary because it's so applicable. Sand, we drank sand because we didn't know what water was. That's Devil May Cry 1. We didn't know what this kind of game could be yet. We didn't know where this genre would go. But here it is, and it's like, oh wow, this is cool. This is some neat ideas. It's so obvious why this took off the way it did, why it sold so well, why they were willing to greenlit a sequel before the game even came out. Because everybody could look at this and say, yeah, no, this is going to be legit. And considering how much I am very fond of 3 of the 6 games in the DMC series, I stand behind that. Yeah, Civilization is pretty much the exact same thing. That's a great comparison. Have you ever played Civilization 1? That game has a lot of potential and arguably started the 4X genre. But Civ 1 sucks. So, so that's Devil May Cry 1. Now, for the highlight reel, I'm going to go ahead and be like,